Now, almost every night, we bring you some blue state woke horror story that is like affecting our schools, our workplaces, even our safety. And it's very frustrating to see beautiful places like Seattle and Portland, Chicago, descend into darkness because of bad governance. So I really empathize with this sentiment that something outside the box needs to be done to just stop the madness. Marjorie Taylor Greene, a congresswoman for a few years now, has called for something akin to a national divorce.
Red states could choose in how they allow people to vote in their states. What I think would be something that some red states could propose is, well, okay, if Democrat voters choose to flee these blue states where they cannot tolerate the living conditions, they don't want their children taught these horrible things, and they really change their mind on the types of policies that they support, well, once they move to a red state, guess what? Maybe you don't get to vote for 5 years.
Okay, well, first, a law prohibiting American citizens who've not committed a crime from voting would probably not withstand legal scrutiny. And second, how would this, like a national divorce, be good for conservatism? Now, why would we want to embrace the states that gave us Jimmy Carter and Bill Clinton, but essentially give up on the states that gave us Reagan and Trump? Imagine if Youngkin had given up on Virginia, or if Republicans in Long Island gave up on New York. The last thing we need is an American breakup of any sort. Remember, a motto of this show, almost from the start, over 5 years ago, has been no state left behind. Just because it often seems like Democrats have given up on America themselves doesn't mean ever that Republicans or conservatives should. They should not. I'm certainly not willing to give up on the states that gave us Sinatra, John Wayne, or that welcomed my grandparents from Poland. There are good, hardworking people in Illinois, in New York, and in California, Washington State, who don't want to move and who are looking for new leadership. So let's give it to them. Keep organizing. Keep registering people to vote. And get real about early voting. Keep making the case that liberalism is failing everywhere it's tried. Joining me now is Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz. Congressman, now, Marjorie Taylor Greene said in her tweet that we need to separate by red states and blue states and shrink the federal government. Everyone I talk to says this. Well, again, I understand how frustrating it is to see these states, again, descend into darkness. But do you agree with what she's saying here?
I'm not for a national divorce, but I do think the federal government should at least have to spend the night on the couch for a while, like, Bill Clinton had to after the Monica Lewinsky stuff. I've been with Marjorie Taylor Greene as we've traveled to places like California advocating for the God-fearing, red-blooded Americans who live there. And too often we see a homogenized federal wokeness pushed on parts of the country who don't want it. I believe that the best pushback is a national renewal, not a national divorce. It's something that Marjorie Taylor Greene is certainly helping to inspire. But look, we're a country that when we had the presidency, the House and the Senate, we couldn't even secure the border. So I don't believe we would be able to effectuate any type of national divorce. And I think that the politics of the America First priorities would do a great deal to unify us. And hey, it would be one thing, Laura, to reject a national divorce more fervently if we didn't have our leaders cheating on the country with Ukraine, which is what we saw from President Biden recently.
Well, but Congressman, to that point, I mean, we have lots of Republicans in the Senate, pretty much the entire Republican leadership, who, as far as I can tell, are willing for us to stay in Ukraine with funding Ukraine for 30, 40 years. I mean, I don't think that's what the Republican electorate wants. So, I mean, we have just as much of a problem with Republican leadership to some extent as we do with some of the Democrat leadership. At least you know where the Democrats are. They're way to the left. And a lot of these Republicans are pretending to play conservative when they're really on the side of China or, globalization or globalism and against their own electorate. Isn't that the case?
Undeniably, and it's infuriating that in blue states where we could have more enthusiastic candidacies and campaigns, we often nominate these rhino Republicans. And right now, the only area code where funding for Ukraine is universally popular is the 202 area code, because out in the country, people are wondering why we don't care more about our own sovereignty. I think it's debasing for our own leaders to go there and pay for the pensions of Ukrainian government officials, while here in our country we have pension funds for our police and firefighters that go unfunded. And when you see the extent to which we're willing to pour cash on a historically corrupt country, it is as if we have learned no lessons from the past. Like, we just lost a 20-year war to goat herders with rifles in Afghanistan, and now all of a sudden we're poking a nuclear power in Russia, where Vladimir Putin's like some sort of Bond villain that becomes more dangerous and deranged as Russia continues to lose power and influence. So we are majoring in the minors by involving ourselves excessively in this war in Ukraine. We ought to raise our gaze and confront the China threat.
Well, I mean, you know, I've been singing the China song for 20 years, 25 years now, so I completely agree with you. But none of this is aided by a quote national divorce. Again, that doesn't solve any of these problems. And it's now an argument that the Democrats are going to use against us in 2024, saying, well, those people want the country to be split in two. Even it's not really what she's saying, but it's such an easily caricatured sentiment and so easily distorted that I don't think it's really worth the bother of even making the argument. I mean, that's my point. You're just giving them a bat to hit you over the head with.
So I think Marjorie Taylor Greene is making an invigorated argument for federalism, which I think a lot of voters would ascribe to. I don't think that it's helpful when we have Democrats trying to divide us, even divide parents from their own children by pushing woke ideology in the classroom. So the way to make this debate constructive is for the House of Representatives under Republican control to use the power of the purse to defund the woke, weaponized federal government, from the Department of Education to the Department of Labor to even elements of the Department of Justice and the FBI. And that's where there has to be Republican stridence, not just in press releases and floor speeches, but when we actually get to the debt limit and the appropriations bills. And guess what? Because of the fights that we had in early January, we actually have exquisite tools now to target those agencies and target those bureaucrats with specific votes to defund them and defang them.
Yeah, and also legislation that it does have some bipartisan support, like banning TikTok and removing the permanent normal trade relations status for China. That would shake it up. Congressman, great to see you. And again, we empathize with the frustration of Marjorie Taylor Greene, just not the solution.